community-driven approach, vote against this motion and keep Tasmania moving forward. Thank you.
Further speakers to the motion? There being no further speakers to the motion, I'll take the member for Bass.
Thank you, Speaker. Rise this afternoon to make my contribution to the private member's motion before the House and indicate at the opening that Tasmanian Labor won't be supporting the position. There's been a lot said in this chamber over the last couple of weeks. There's been a lot said in the community over the last couple of weeks around the devastating events that we find ourselves in and experiencing as a community with the mass mortalities from salmon farming in the southeast. And a lot of people have made comments and laid on the record their thoughts and concerns for the workers that are actually day in, day out responding to and cleaning up the areas of Tasmania that have been impacted. And there is nobody in Tasmania more concerned, more devastated, more overwhelmed, more exhausted than the people that are working on our salmon farms and dealing with this every day. There have been a number of stories shared around community members and residents as being impacted by the materials that are being found on beaches. And again, with community members, with members of parliament, with the salmon farmers of Tasmania, everyone understands how horrible this experience has been. And I am glad to hear that in the chamber today, the Greens have acknowledged that this event is unprecedented. There has not been an experience like this in Tasmania of this scale. Of these fish mortalities, and as a response, one of the things that I'd like to put on the record today is my thanks to the companies that operate in Tasmania that responded immediately in terms of their cleanup and responded immediately in terms of their response to understand the circumstances that we find ourselves in now, and as any good business or any good individual would do, get to work on understanding and responding to and ensuring that, as the Minister herself said, any credible individual, any successful, any innovative, any research and science-based entity would do, continue to see how they can continue to improve and respond to situations like this. And so I want to put on my record and this mass mortality event actually followed an announcement, a leadership position taken by one of the companies just days before, where for the first time one of the companies actually in real time disclosed and announced their use of antibiotics. And I think what we can see in Tasmania is a group of companies working in Tasmania that all the time wanting to meet the expectations and the standards of the community and of this place, and are doing more and more all the time to be transparent in the ways that they operate, both in terms of the expectations that a community has, but also in terms of the celebrations that a community has. And I know the focus of this motion before us this afternoon is around the devastating events, but I think it's really easy to lose perspective in these moments around the bigger picture that exists for salmon farming in Tasmania. And the bigger picture, the longer time picture of this collection of people in our state, is that it's an incredible success story. It's a group of people that started as a very small group of people, as individuals in fact, that and I'll just interrupt my flow there for a minute. I had an opportunity to visit one of the birthplaces of aquaculture, of fish farming in Tasmania in our own electorate, Mr Wood of Bass, last year, I think it was, it might have been the year before, at Bridport. And there were individuals decades ago that said, I reckon we can grow some fish in this way in Tasmania. And from individuals, from families, grew this opportunity. When I visited one of the fish feed plants compliance in recent times. I heard the story where, originally when these farms were developed, they were feeding fish out of buckets from wheelbarrows by hand. And because of the way that people in Tasmania think, and because of the way people in Tasmania have to work hard to create solutions to challenges, innovation came in from Tasmania. And I think it's easy to lose sight in these moments, in these times where things are difficult and people are overwhelmed with what we see and what we're experiencing, that we lose sight of the fact that salmon farmers in Tasmania have led some of the world's greatest innovations in how to grow fish to provide food for the people of the planet. We can lose sight of the fact that farming salmon in Tasmania has the lowest carbon footprint of the production of protein, and that is one of the greatest ways that we can grow and develop a great product at a great price for people to live a healthy life. And I want to respond to the contribution by the JLN member in the chamber today on some of his comments, but also on some comments that were made previously, and I think it might have been through question times last week. It was sometime early in the days last week. There was a particular comment made about our wild fishes in Tasmania, one of the reasons why farming fish is so important is because over time our wild fisheries are depleting. And for a whole range of reasons, and for pressure, for all sorts of things. But I ask the member to reflect on his source information where he says, and he's repeated now at least twice in this chamber, that hundreds of wild fishers in Tasmania have been forced out of that livelihood because of salmon farming. Now that's just absolutely not true. And I think for the wild fishers in Tasmania who have had collectively really challenging times over a number of years, there are reasonable things to reflect on that could be different to support our wild fishers, but to blame the salmon industry, salmon become an easy target for everybody. If there's something wrong, it's got to be salmon's fault. And to suggest that wild fishers have been forced out by our salmon farms in numbers of hundreds, I think is something that the member should reflect on and perhaps go back to the source and check and not repeat in this chamber again, because that's wildly unfair. And there are a lot of things that happen that are wildly unfair for this industry, and I was going to say the minister. One of the things I think is challenging about the governance of salmon farming in Tasmania is that for whatever reason the government of the day made a decision to divide the portfolio of aquaculture across a number of areas. So just in the last couple of weeks there's been some comments which I would support around the difficulty to get on top of a public communication around this from government has been that there's so many pieces to the puzzle, there's so many moving parts. So we've had contributions from Minister from Primary Industries, Minister for the Environment, Minister for Fisheries, but that's not what the resources, thank you, and the Premier himself. And as a reflection on that, I think it makes it difficult. It feels like the government have sort of caught up now and are coming into a coordinated approach, but it's not great for the people that are farming salmon in Tasmania to sort of have to wait for the catch-up of the government to get themselves organised to be able to come out cleanly, because on Tuesday when questions were asked of the Premier, I think on reflection even the Premier would say that he was a bit slow and a bit sort of soft to come and start communicating around what was happening in Tasmania. And soft and slow, I often use the language in the chamber about this government has lost their capacity to act with urgency. They've lost their capacity to see the critical issues that actually Tasmania need them to lead on. And one of the areas really that Tasmanians needed this government to lead on and to act with more urgency and to understand the importance was the appointment of the Director of the EPA. It was mid to late last year where the former director announced that he was going to retire. The recruitment processes started late last year. The recruitment closed in January, the first week of January this year, and still we don't have a permanent director of the EPA. Now, I think everyone in this chamber would be agreed that that's just not good enough, and it's not fair either on the people that are installed in the temporary positions. It's not fair for the people that are in that organisation that, although they have leadership, they don't have a permanently installed full-time director for the EPA, which Tasmanians needed right now, the salmon farmers needed right now, and it would be useful for the Parliament to have had that leadership and therefore that level of information and sharing right now. So there are some things that are happening in the government that aren't helping now, and that I hope that there's a reflection from the government around that. When we have an event of this scale, when we have an event that hasn't happened in this way before, we do call on the resources and the effort and the energy and the goodwill of many to do the work of recovery. And I know this motion is around reflecting on an inquiry to do around that, but as already has been outlined by the government by a number of members, there probably isn't an industry in Tasmania or even in the country that has as much regulation or as much strong regulation, has as much legislation or has as many standards as the salmon industry does in Tasmania. It cannot be a statement of truth to say that it's under-regulated, that there aren't strong frameworks or processes in place for salmon farming in Tasmania. And so I and Tasmanian Labor do not believe that it's necessary for this motion to be supported today. And we know that with the many processes, with the auditing, with the reporting, and there is an expectation and there's been a commitment made that the reporting will be public, that work happen with the frameworks that already exist between the government, between the companies and between the EPA, whether it be the EPA, whether it be the role that biosecurity will play, whether it be the role that NRE play. There is substantial work that will occur as a result of this extraordinary effort. So Tasmanian Labor don't support the motion before the House today. Put on record our thanks for the workers that continue now day and night to do the work of clean-up, acknowledge the concern, the devastation, the impact that has occurred to Tasmanians at this time and to workers at this time. Believe that it is important that the government maintain their alignment in the communications and perhaps reflect on and consider whether it is too many moving parts to have too many ministers across what is Australia's most valuable seafood sector and Tasmania's greatest primary industry. I don't think we can afford to be let down by a slowness in process right now. Having said all of that, salmon farming in Tasmania is something that we should be proud of. There's an extraordinary event which has caused devastation and has caused impact that's been acknowledged. Apologies have been offered. Recovery and clean-up is happening, but the motion before the Parliament this afternoon